Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, has their quotes, how they want to destroy industrialized society, how they want to bring in, quote, a Chinese-style police state that forced one-child policies, forced abortions, forced sterilization, how the environmental movement is nothing but a death cult, a bunch of sicko, human-hating parasites who want to be able to organize and control our society, selectively decide who can have businesses, who can have factories, who can have jobs. This is big government's takeover. And where I live, they're taking over. Home inspections, $2.6 billion in taxes. It is so insane and so illegal. Get Endgame at Infowars.com today. Make copies of it. I made this film 3 years ago. And so when I hear about another UN chief in his own book and NASA chiefs and others, saying we need to destroy industrialized society, they don't really want to destroy it. They want to own it and control it and shut down their competition. They're monopoly men. Now, going back to Mark Moreno of Climate Depot. Mark, you're one of the leading experts out there. You've been fighting this for decades. But I'm going to tell you point blank. You keep saying they're idiots, they're fools, they're always caught being wrong. If you read all the emails and Bill Santer and all of them, they admit that it was made up. They know it's a joke. The Club of Rome knows it's a joke. They want to teach humans to be guilty, that we're bad, so the mother government can run our lives. I mean, sure, their followers are a bunch of well-meaning idiots who are wrong, and it's like astrology. But for the leadership, there's nothing, to do with mumbo jumbo. They know it's a fraud. I mean, do you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they knew this. This was a just house of cards from the very beginning in 1988. When they came out with this, the UN got involved. It was a political organization masquerading as a scientific organization. As early as 1996, you mentioned Ben Santer. They were altering the documents, violating their own internal rules to put in key phrases saying that mankind is responsible for global warming. They did whatever it took, and then they invented the hockey stick. They actually had scientists conspiring behind the scenes that we had to, quote, get rid of the medieval warm period, unquote, because you couldn't explain unprecedented warmth when the medieval warm period was clearly warmer than today when we didn't have SUVs. So they got rid of the medieval warm period. And then they went through, and then even when that was debunked, they quietly essentially downplayed it or almost removed it from the 2007 UN report, showing that there was no medieval warm period and that we were unprecedented. But essentially, if you go back to Timothy Wirth, the former senator from Colorado, he said, even if we're wrong on the science, we're doing right by policy. So you know from the beginning, and that was back in 1988 when the UN was founded, the UN Climate Panel was founded, you know from the beginning that it was never about the science. It was all about trying to scare people to whatever means possible to get the policy objectives they wanted done. And the policy objectives have been the same, whether it's global cooling, man-made global cooling in the 70s. They thought our emissions were causing global dimming and thus, cooling the earth. And we had Newsweek actually saying climatologists were pessimistic that we could act fast enough, to stave off disaster. They were warning of floods, droughts. It's literally plug and play. Whatever eco catastrophe of the day, it's always the same. Oh, there's going to be floods, droughts, severe storms. We're going to have worse hurricanes. It's going to be horrible.
And by the way, Mark, you're not even pressing the issue. I mean, it's worse than what you're even, saying because you're in a hurry here. Pachauri comes out last week and says, yeah, we put out fake data. I read his quote on air. I'm paraphrasing it now. Yeah, we put out some fake data on the Himalayas based on a cell phone call and a graduate paper some student wrote, a mountaineer student. But you know what? We wanted to scare people so that they would do something because we want to save you. And I can't tell you how many reporters have sat across from me and said, okay, it's a fraud, but don't we need to get away from oil? Isn't it all...
That's kind of like Dan Rather. If you remember the National Guard documents and George Bush, oh, yeah, sure, the documents are a fraud, but the information was probably true. So what's the big deal? Who cares if it was a fake document? It must be true because we all believe it. And that's what you found in the ClimateGate emails. They were actually talking about, I can't prove it, but the medieval warm period must not have been as cold as, must not have been as warm as today. They said they made it happen. They couldn't prove it scientifically, but in their gut, they knew they had to produce
But take Santer. I mean, he was interviewed by Jesse Ventura. That's when that finally broke. We'd always known it. He said, yeah, we took out 5 scientists in our own report in 96 that told the UN man is not causing warming. And he just admits it. I mean, that's as big as ClimateGate right there. And, so it's not a mistake. it's not just some data that was separate they altered. I mean, now it's come out with the thermostats all over the world. The UN document came out 2 months ago.
Yeah, Joe DeLeo, meteorologist from the Weather Channel, American Meteorological Society, and Anthony Watts from Watts Up With That website have shown that the U.S. government, to use a kind word, is massaging the temperature data for a warming bias. To use other words, I mean, this is outright data manipulation, all for a political end.
And it's being done coordinated. That UN document 2 months ago, how they, over a decade ago, coordinated with major universities.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This has been, from the beginning, it's been an agenda-driven science. They had to come up. They actually meet, and they'll actually get together. We had John Christie, a UN scientist, who said he was at the last, I think it was a 2001 UN climate report, and he said that all the UN lead authors are sitting around a table conspiring how to make the report so alarming that the U.S. would have to endorse the UN Kyoto Climate Treaty. This isn't science. And yet we were fed hook, line, and sinker by the media that this was somehow a scientific process. This was the gold standard process. This was a fraud. And there's a Princeton physicist just came out and said ClimateGate reveals it as fraud, pure and simple. And that's what's on my headline up here now. It's fraud. The headline is the climate change fraud from this Indian newspaper. Around the world, people are catching on, and people are getting angry. You mentioned the Himalayan thing. Well, the scientists responsible for having that information in there that was completely unvetted, wild information that it was going to melt in a few decades, which is laughable, admitted that it was left in there because they wanted to pressure policymakers to act on global warming. That's scientific fraud. In a previous day, we would have trials. People would be losing their jobs, their tenure, their professorships. It would be public scandal. And we're still not at that point. The U.S. media has completely ignored this. The UK media deserves medals right now, and the Indian media deserves medals. But the mainstream media in the U.S. is almost, they have done a few ClimateGate stories. And kudos to Katie Couric, whoever thought we would be saying that, at CBS Evening News. She's actually done at least 2 good reports on this issue. But
that's because it's imploding on them, and now they understand that they're being fully discredited, so they're desperate, and that signals that it really is in deep trouble because they're doing this. But shifting gears, Mark, and then I want to go to calls. Shifting gears here. If you have tens of billions of dollars in Europe, in the U.S., given to universities, given to the UN, given to organizations in fraud, you have them lying and scaring people to get money to then push an agenda. Is this not racketeering? Is it not fraud? Is it not criminal? What is the state of criminal investigations, and can we have that? Because in England, they have appointed a leading pro-man-made global warming fearmonger as the, quote, independent head of the Whitewash Commission.
Yeah, not only in England, but at Penn State University, it's a bunch of, from the reports I'm seeing, it's a bunch of people who are either alumni or tied with the university who aren't going to want the university tied to scandal in their investigation of Michael Hockey Stick Mann. So that's a problem, because you can't have, you can't have a university investigate itself, or you can't have a fellow traveler, if you will, investigate another fellow traveler. It's just, you're not going to get, I think, that's why I think these investigations are ultimately meaningless. This is in the battle of public opinion, Alex. And as of October of last year, Halloween, more Americans believed in haunted houses than man-made global warming. So we are winning. And from the state houses to the cities to the Congress, they are being mocked and ridiculed now. And I just think it's going to be harder and harder for anyone to enact this because global warming, the entire movement has been exposed as fraudulent from the UN down. You even have New York Times reporter Andrew Revkin backing away, saying, well, there's other organizations now besides the United Nations. Whoever said the UN? The UN was touted as the gold standard, and now people are saying, well, it was never that big part.
Well, they were organizing and running the fraud. But again, shifting gears here, if you go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, you and many others are being attacked by these different fraudulent scientists. There's talk of arresting climate deniers, treason charges for Lord Monckton. Now you've been vindicated in a royal flush, not just in spades. If they were freaking out and panicking 6, 7 years ago, we now learn, I wonder what the internal state of these crooks is right now.